Good evening, and you're very welcome to episode 17 of this fifth season of the League of Ireland Women's podcast here on finalwhistle.ie. I believe there's a bit of celebration in order, first and foremost, Aaron. We think it's your 100th show.
Yeah, we think it is.
We
I
chatted
think
about
it's
it.
100.
Yeah, we chatted about it a few weeks ago. Of course, we're about 125, 127, I think, for the full complement of shows. But we've had a couple of different variations. But you've been with us for the last 100 or so.
Are we episode 17 of this season as well?
Yeah, it's creeping up there, isn't it? And I suppose we're back into FAI Cup action. We've got a full round of games to look back at over the last weekend. A few surprises. First non-league side to get a win at that level of the competition. Definitely since COVID, we think since 2015, which makes it 10 years since Shell's under 18s got to the semi-final of the competition as a non-league outfit.
Let me ask you the question.
Oh,
I'm going to absolutely nail you right now. Only a minute into the show. Who did they beat? They won 2 games in the FAI Cup that year. Who did they beat?
I was a little preoccupied at the time. I was off on a bicycle cycling around the world, so I don't remember that season at all. I was gone for all of 14 and 15, so my mind is blank. I don't know. I completely missed that at the time. So
the other question I'll ask you, right, is you probably won't get this question. Do you know who played? Do you know any of the players who played in that Shells team?
Oh yeah, there was a fairly good side there. You've spoken about them a few times. There's a few household names in that team. Like there's probably 5 or 6 girls who've gone on to be fairly established Premier Division players.
I'll give you some names. Nadine Ryan, who was played with Kilkenny United. Sarah Dunn, who played with Kilkenny United. Leanne Payne, who was with Terenure now. Ashlyn Dunbar played with UCD Waves. Sophie Waters. You've also got people like Megan Lynch, who's still with Shells as it is. Lisa Murphy, who played centre back for Bows, actually played up front for that team.
Well, Leanne Payne was on the bench, I think, this weekend for Terenure, if I'm not mistaken. So there's still a few links with this year. 10 years later, still a few links with that particular
So
side.
I'll give you the two teams. They beat Cork City in Tolka Park, and then they beat Castlebar Celtic out in Parnell's grounds. And then they obviously lost to the main Shells team in the semi-finals of the Cup. What a mad time that was, because like at that stage, no disrespect to Peamount, but that young Peamount side that was there at the time, with the likes of Niamh Farrelly only coming through, your Lucy McCartans, your Lauren O'Callaghan's, because all the likes of Anya had gone, Steph had gone, Karen had gone, Chloe Mistaki had gone. Like if they'd have got Peamount instead of getting Shelbourne in that Cup semi-final, there was a real possibility that year that we could have potentially had Shelbourne versus Shelbourne in an FAI Cup final. And ever since then, you haven't been allowed, like with the men's league now. They've now curtailed that rule that no second team is allowed into the FAI Cup.
It was UCD caused that one. I think UCD senior side drew
was
UCD
that the same year?
Intermediate side. I don't know if it was the same year, but it definitely happened in the last. Well, yeah, that's what happened on the men's side, and I suppose that would have been forced on that side more so than anywhere else. Some other big results. Treaty United would. You have to say a second side out. A lot of youngsters playing, a lot of changes. Some of the big names that we've been talking about all year left on the bench. Madison McGann, no show from her. Also, Isabella Flacchini left on the bench as well. And I suppose it was fairly obvious from early on what direction the game was going. But I do like how Treaty approached the game in terms of the team they picked, and then having the confidence to leave those players on there and not bring in the big guns, even just for a cameo at the end. 8-0 winners against Ferns. Not a great day from a non-league point of view. 6-0 Terenure going down to Athlone Town, although we probably expected Athlone to blow them away. But again, we're seeing, apart from when they're playing
I'll go into that Athlone one in a little while, because that Athlone was interesting, and what happened with Athlone and the way Athlone sort of approached the game will be interesting, because it's completely different to Treaty and how Treaty approached it. But for me, I thought when I was watching back young Ciara Breslin, the first goal was nice. The second finish was superb as well, and it was just like she was superb. And like these young players, you have to think they're playing for an opportunity to maybe be the next bunch of Treaty United players. Sabrina Salbrini, I thought her first goal was on the 53rd minute was superb as well. But like it was an easy enough day out for Treaty, and that's not being disrespectful to Ferns. Like, and I don't want to use the sort of "I told you so," but like I've sort of harped on a little bit about the gap between the top teams and the bottom teams. Like realistically, Treaty could have scored 10 in this game, like Athlone could have easily scored 10 in their game, and it's not a good look when you look at it that you see that a non-league side hasn't scored a goal against the senior side since TK United did against Kilkenny United. I think that was in 2019 or 2018. So like it's a tough one, and for Ferns, it was a great opportunity for them, and it was a great reward for progressing so far in their own competitions in their own leagues. And like I think that's where that reward, it still means a lot to these sort of players. I got to play in the FAI Cup. I was talking to friends from Newbridge Town pre and post game against Whitehall, and sort of to talk about, the cup, it's such a big thing. We're in the senior cup. And I don't think these non-league teams, while the gap is so big, I don't think these non-league teams take it for granted that they actually get an opportunity to play against these sort of clubs. And like it was a routine enough day for Treaty United. But for me, like it was always going to be the case. And as you say, there was some really nice finishes. The one thing that I took away from the weekend, apart from in Sligo and DLR, is most places the conditions looked quite horrific in terms of the weather. Sligo looked as though we were getting a nice bit of sunshine. I know me for one, even in Talca Park, I actually sat over on the riverside, and I normally don't stand. I normally stand behind the goal, and Shells was just lashing rain. But a really good win for Treaty, and when we talk about the draw later, the cup has really opened up for them, and we sort of started at the start of the year. We'd love to see Treaty have a good cup run.
Yeah, well, the cup draw is going to be interesting. It has been done already. We will chat about it later on, but I think we could be seeing a Treaty or a Bows potentially having a nice route to the final. Potentially, if those winners of those two games were to draw each other in the semi-final, we could be seeing a surprise package potentially get to the cup final. Although I suppose both those teams will tell you what you mean surprise package. We've been in the hunt.
But the other thing as well is the game is also the cup semi-finals this year for the first time are also on television as well, live on TG Car. So it's an even bigger thing, and we can see when Bows tend to get home games on TG Car, they don't tend to lack excitement as well. So like I think it's a great opportunity for both sides, and I guess we might as well segue into the Bows game from last week since we mentioned them. A really good win for them against Wexford. I sort of wasn't sure they'd beat Wexford. A superb header from Roisin McGovern to open the scoring, and then Hannah Healy with the pick of the goals in that game. A lovely ball from Sarah McKevitt, and she does the rest. Hannah's just shown what she showed at Shells and sort of coming on at leaps and bounds. The one thing I will take from a Wexford point of view is Ciara Rossiter's first appearance on the pitch since March. Massive to get her back. I know if you're looking from a Wexford viewpoint, Wexford would be really, really disappointed having to have had to play this game on Saturday without Ella Malloy. The Ireland games, the way it falls through, just it's not an official window as such, in the sense of it's a build up to the Euros window, but it's not an international window where games are called off, and in order for games to be called off, you have to have two players in the squad, and like Shamrock Rovers, although as it turns out, Ruchi Littlejohn had already played her last game for Shamrock Rovers, she was missing as well for their last two games. And like for me, I thought Bows were value for the win. I thought Wexford sort of it was a nice finish from Roster later on, but I thought Bows were value for the win. And like the one thing we've said about Bows this year is they've sort of lacked that bit of consistency in terms of results. And for Alban Heise, it's an opportunity to get something out of a cup competition. He's still in the two cups.
How much would a decent run in the cup do for a new manager in the club in terms of Bows? Because we saw Bows do well in the cup last year, but if they were to get to a final, what would that mean for a club like Bows?
I think it's really important. I think it's that sort of breakthrough that they're needing. And it's not to be disrespectful to Bows, but if you look at Bows in the league since 2020 now, and they've sort of stagnated a little bit. They've got a good crop of young players, but they've never necessarily taken that next leap up to the big teams. On their day, they can get a result against the big teams, but they've never actually sort of been consistent in that, taking that leap. So I think if they could get a result and get to a cup final, I think it'd be huge. Like you look at this year, they've beaten Wexford twice, beaten them in the league, beaten them in the cup. They'll hold no fears going into obviously they've got probably the draw they would have wanted in the quarterfinals, but like without being disrespectful, you would expect to see them into the half of the semi-finals, and then like cup football is a weird thing that Bows can beat anybody on their day. Just depends what Bows show up, but I do think it'd be massive if Bows could get to an FAI Cup final.
Yeah, absolutely huge for the club. Let's look at another team that just having a bit of a poor season, could really do with a decent cup run, and that's Peamount. Fairly dominated the game early on, 2 goals. Maybe that Cork won't be too happy to watch again from a defensive point of view, but they nearly let it slip. Really potentially gave Cork a way back into the game. A great finish from Evan Mangan for the first goal, and then, well, we won't talk about the second one from a defending point of view. It was just disappointing all around, I think, from a Peamount side to let them back in to equalise. But when you're in bother, what happens? Step in Ruby Gallagher. She really made a huge impression. She's impressed me this season. We've spoken about her a few times on the show, but what a bit of coolness from her, and what a finish from distance to kind of seal the win in extra time.
But it's twice we've talked about her in Turner's Cross. That's the interesting thing. We talked about her in Turner's Cross as well for the league game and what they'd sort of done, and like I think she's been superb for them. And like when you look at it, they need them sort of next youngsters coming through. And like when I'm watching this game the other day, I'm sort of thinking, okay, Cork pull a goal back. I still expect Peamount to get over the line. Then that defensive frailties sort of come in for Peamount with a second goal. But then Cork had chances. Cork could have nicked it in 90 minutes. And I think probably be a little bit disappointed that they didn't go on and grab a third goal. They had a lot of pressure on Peamount towards the end. But once it went to extra time, you were sort of thinking it's going to be really difficult for Cork. And then when Ruby Gallagher does that, it's very hard to get back into a game, especially having come back from 2-0 down. But I think give Cork a bit of credit for the fact that they actually came back from 2-0 down. I think we can definitely see some positives in things that they're doing. Like, it is definitely an improvement for me from a Cork City viewpoint, but I still think there's a bit of work for them to go. And like I don't think Frank Keller probably gets credit for, because there's a lot of stuff had to go into that team this year to sort of get them even to be competitive in some games. And yes, it hasn't been perfect, but they've definitely shown some improvement since the start of the season. And I think when they look back at it, they'll probably think Peamount were there for the taking in 90 minutes, and they'll be a little bit disappointed they didn't maybe take one of them chances after it went too well.
How important was the introduction of Fionn Bradley? She came off the last 25 minutes, set up 1 goal, scored another. She probably won't get it as easy a finish in her life as that second goal, though.
Well, sorry, what did I say to you at the start of the year? I said she needs a manager that's going to come in, put an arm around her, and sort of show her that she's capable of doing things, because that's the Fiona Bradley who was with Cork City the first time.
Yeah,
that's the Fiona Bradley that Cork City had before she went to treaty. That's a player who's really, really capable. I thought she was brilliant. I thought she was very, very good in what she done, and like she took the goal. She finished her own goal well.
Yeah,
she had the composure to sort of take her time and not just rush the shot. And like she probably could have passed it if she wanted, but the pass even for Ava Mangan's goal for me was superb as well. Yeah, I think she's back to where she was maybe 18 months ago, and I think that's a positive for Cork City.
Yeah, 100%. Let's move up to the showground. Sligo Rovers, DLR, 2 sides who are struggling to get a bit of form in the league, both looking at a good cup run. I think Sligo have been in the semi-finals for the last 2 seasons. This gives them an opportunity, really, against DLR to get to the quarterfinal. Again, they won't be overly happy with how this game turned out for them. DLR kind of never looked like losing it, really. Which is probably a bit of a worry for Steve Feeney. Your thoughts on this game?
Going into this game, you would have said, for me, I would have said Sligo Rovers are favourites. I would have said Sligo were favourites to sort of to win the game. And then when Keelan Dodd scores the first one and then Amber Cosgrove gets the second, you're sort of thinking it's game over, it's dead and buried. But even when when they got that first goal back, I don't think there was necessarily a major panic in DLR Waves. I can definitely see a lot of improvement from DLR Waves, and I think that first win against Sligo Rovers a couple of weeks ago, I don't think we realised how big that win in the Carlisle grounds was for the confidence of Laura Heffernan side. But like even when it gets back to 2-1, you're sort of thinking, okay, they're in the game now. Can Sligo go and nick a quick second, bring it on? But then all of a sudden, 5 minutes later, they give a penalty away, and then you're 3-1 down and you're chasing the game again. Don't get me wrong, it was a nice finish from Anna McDaniel, sort of a bit of a consolation goal in injury time. But
we think it was a nice finish from Anna McDaniel. Very hard to see from the coverage.
The commentator tells us it was a nice finish, so we'll give him his word. It was it's frustrating when you look back at LOI TV in that situation, and the cameraman sort of pans out nearly goes out towards the halfway line instead of going towards the box. It's a frustrating one, but Anna McDaniel continues to sort of show what she's been doing for Sligo lately. I think she's been one of Sligo's really, really good players this season. What's that? That's her third goal in all competitions this season.
Yeah, second goal in 2 weeks though, which is even so. From a personal point of view, it's nice to be kind of hitting that run of form. She did score against Shells last week.
But yeah, I think from a Sligo viewpoint, that's what four defeats in all competitions in a row, mixed in with a Linfield draw. It's been a tough old time. It's been a tough old time for them. Whereas DLR is starting to show a little bit of that form, that sort of when it said they'd finish above the top of that lower pack. They're starting to show that bit of form, but I still think they have a long way to go if they want to sort of make up that ground. Yeah,
and I suppose we have to temper that with the fact that their 2 wins in 3 games are both against Sligo, who are struggling as well. So it's not a huge statement from DLR, but it's a decent statement to go to. I think they went to the Showdowns twice and beat them down there. No, sorry, they beat them in the Carlisle grounds, as you mentioned. Sorry, yeah. So,
but the thing is, they Peamount in the league on Saturday week at home. Peamount's form is patchy. They've been decent against Peamount. I wouldn't be at all surprised if they nick a result against Peamount in 2 weeks.
Is the result a draw or?
Well, to me, I'd say a result is at least a draw.
Yeah, okay. Fair. No, that's fair. And I think they'd settle for that as well. And I suppose depending on how other games go, that a draw could be enough to get them up if Sligo were beaten significantly to get them off the base of the table. A win would put them in potential to get out of that bottom 3, which will be absolutely huge for them at the moment. There's a real kind of 2-tier, or 3-tier, maybe even league appearing. We won't talk about the league today though, but we can start seeing a kind of a shape to the league table with the top 2, the bottom 3 or 4, and then kind of everybody else in between. Let's look at some other results from the weekend. Sligo Rovers, of course, they'll be disappointed to be knocked out, but I suppose at home you got to be kind of creating more chances against a side that are at the same level as you in that league table, and it just didn't happen for them.
Yeah, 100%. That's all. That's what it is. It's not taking their chances.
Let's go to the Battle of the Champions just down the road in Athlone Town, where the home side, of course, the FAI, the league champions from last year versus the Amateur Cup champions, Terenure. If there's going to be a surprise, you'd expect it to come from Terenure any given year. But unfortunately for the non-league sides, Terenure just not at the races. 6-0 winners. We haven't seen the goals because they haven't been posted to the
Breifne. It was 6-0 at half time.
Yeah, and a whole host of changes for
if you look at it, you have Izzy Groves, Roisin Malloy, Kelly Brady, Izzy Groves, and Natalie McNally, Hannah Weish.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden, half time, Colin Fortune says, okay, Kelly Brennan, Kaylee Shine, Hannah Welsh, Kelly Brady, come on, let's get off. Izzy Groves comes off as well. Like, they just took no risks in that sort of game for me. And I think it's more of a case of Athlone took their foot off the gas rather than Terenure sort of holding them. Like, it was the one thing that I'd sort of been. I was speaking to people in Talca Park, and I was like, in that sort of situation, how do you assess the game from an Athlone viewpoint? And you're probably looking at, okay, we're 6-0 up at halftime. Do I really need to have these players on the park in terms of if someone gets a sit? Like, we seen what happened in the Oval when Kelly Brady got sent off, Madison Gibson got sent off. All of a sudden, they missed the next game.
Yeah.
Like, do you really need? I think that might have been playing in Colin Fortune's mind a little bit as well. I mean, like, do I need to pick up a silly injury? Do I need to pick up a silly red card? And he just made changes. And like 6-0 for Athlone. Like, if Athlone really wanted, they could have made it 10, could have made it 12. But I think it was more of a case of
job done.
Athlone took the foot off the gas.
Yeah, let's talk about the approach of the two lads, because I think if we look at what happened down in Treaty, where Sean Russell put out effectively a very changed side. I don't know exactly how many changes from the league game the week before, but it was significant. Athlone pretty much a first strength side, and then withdrew half the team at half time when they were 6-0 up. If you're in the hot seat there, which approach do you take? Do you give the girls? Do you show the girls you got the confidence in them to go from the start and still win the game? Or do you go and nail the game and then let the girls go out and enjoy themselves in the second half and have that opportunity to take a look at other players? Which approach do you prefer?
See, it's a difficult one, because I like the idea of having the game dead and buried, gone, thanks, see you later, I can take the players off. But you also have to look at it from an Athlone viewpoint. If you look at it from an Athlone viewpoint, in terms of, like, Athlone would have played Peamount in the league last week. They would have played Shell. The Shell's game was off. They haven't played a lot of football in a period of time. They're off again this weekend because they didn't make the quarterfinals of the All Ireland Cup. So you're sort of talking, if I don't play these players, or I leave them on the bench, you're talking, I don't play them from the 21st of June, and then the next proper game is the 12th of July. It's a bit of a stretch as well, in that sense of sort of minutes and managing minutes as well, coming off a break. Like, it's a difficult situation. I would assume that in Treaty they had a little bit of an eye on the Shells game this weekend and not wanting to pick up any niggles, because that's the only reason why you sort of even wouldn't introduce the likes of Licini, or even you wouldn't take that risk. Where I don't blame Sean Russell in terms of he 100% trusts his players to win the game. I think if Colin Fortune, I think he would, no doubt, if he had to put out a younger side, he would have had trust in them, because you've seen what Athlone can do. I think it just depends on the manager and how the manager likes to approach. I don't mind either approach, to be honest with you. I don't mind either. And I think situations sort of call for a little bit of an examination. But I think both managers probably doing what suited them best at the weekends.
Yeah, and I agree. I think there's absolute merit in both approaches. I suppose if I'm a player in that squad and I'm on the fringes, I want to start. So I'd prefer, if I'm a kind of a number 13, 14, 15 in that squad, I'd prefer to get the crack from the off. It's also goes to show that maybe we don't quite know what's coming from the non-league ranks any given year, because I suppose you look through that Terenure side and it's not exactly a complete list of unknowns. Like, there's players in there. Kira Smith obviously has huge experiences with Bows last year. Was with the Underdogs.
Shannon Thomas had some experience with Peamount.
Niamh Garrity's name has popped up on my radar a few times. Caroline Healy the same. So, and then you've got former winner Melissa Houghton. Now, I'm not sure how much she'd contribute at this point of her career, but like, she was a decent player a decade ago. Won the cup with St. Catherine's almost 2 decades ago now. Was it St. Catherine's?
I don't want to sound, when I say this sort of thing, I don't want to sound bad, okay? But like, this is the difference when you're talking non-league compared to League of Ireland. Like, if you look at that bench from Terenure, the two players who were late 30s, one player's in their 40s. Like, it's the same at Whitehall. A lot of players who've played a lot of football, who've been there, back over the course of time. Like, it's difficult for these sort of players to come in against a League of Ireland team where the fitness levels are completely through the roof. And like, you can clearly see why the likes of a Terenure do very well in the EWFL and in the likes of the Amateur Cup with the players and the quality they've got. But it's just the standard. The step up from non-league to League of Ireland is massive. Like, even if you put, say, that Terenure side into a first division, like, they'd be competitive with some teams. The top half of the teams maybe not, but the mid tables, I think they'd be competitive in it. And
I think if they were playing at that level, like, if you were to put them in, let's say, arguably, because we did get feedback from last week's show. A former manager in the league got in touch with a bit of a. I had a bit of a back and forth with him, and he was kind of talking about the suggestion that there'll be a first division next year beneath the Premier Division. So say hypothetically you're bringing in 4 new teams and making 2 divisions of 8, and let's split the league as it is right now, for argument's sake, with the top 8 and then the bottom 4 dropping down. If you're looking at Cork, Waterford, Sligo Rovers, and DLR, I think if you bring in, and now Terenure are not a good example because I don't think they'd come into the league. We're probably more looking at the Coves, the Dundalks, the Droghedas, maybe a Longford potentially, but unlikely. A Donegal potentially could come in as well if you're looking at that kind of situation.
It's Harps nowadays. They got rid of Donegal league. And
no, but
I 100% agree. 100% agree with you. But like,
apologies to the clubs I'm not mentioning there, because you could put in Bray, you could put in a couple of other clubs, even CK United or whatever they're called. I think the CK United down there in
it's Carlow Kilkenny United, you're right.
So you're looking at these kind of level of clubs coming in, and if you were to bring in an intake, I think that will be a really competitive first division. Yes, those 4 teams will be the best 4 teams in it that are currently set up as senior sides, but I think the other 3 will be competitive against each other and could take a pop at any of those 4 on any given day. And I think if you see a Terenure style squad, playing at that level week on week in a first division of the league, and I'm not saying Terenure specifically, but that group of players, I think they'd compete because of the standard would be reduced. But I think the gap down to the amateur stuff at the moment in this country is just colossal, because the Terenures might have a single player or 2 who have the ability. No, that's not fair. They might have a half a dozen who have the ability, but they have very little strength and depth at that standard of player. They might have 5 or 6, but they definitely don't have 15 or 16. And we're looking at girls coming on like the likes of Anna McDaniel at Sligo, and the likes of Fiona Bradley at Cork. We've talked about them at length on this show, but that type of player, they don't have enough of them coming through because they've been sucked into the current LOI standard and academies, so they're not coming through the amateur game. And it does mean that 15, 16, 17-year-olds are not featuring at that level, at adult level, because they're in the LOI academies. But I think long-term, we're going to see those players maybe fall out of the League of Ireland, which some will take as falling out of the game, but we will see those players, and you can see it even in the Newbridge side that got through. A load of players there who have experience at Cork, at Treaty, even with some of the Dublin clubs. There's plenty of players there. You might not necessarily recognize the names immediately, but they would have been involved in the academies, and they've gone back into, I think it was Newbridge I spotted over the weekend. There was a lot of players there that had
definitely come. Whitehall, definitely.
Yeah. Like even looking at the Whitehall team, the likes of Yvonne Hedigan at Bowes and Sligo, played very few games due to injury in the last few weeks. Who else catches my eye there?
Lara Phipps, Liam McHugh.
Yeah. Liam McHugh played underage with Sligo back in the day. It's a different Liam McHugh.
You've got Jane McCavish, Nemi Shemu, Niamh Kennan, all these other players who would have played.
And like the likes of Chris McCauley Ryan has been around the game for a long, long time. So these players have come back in with experience. And I think we're going to see, while the League of Ireland has stretched ahead in the last decade, and particularly in the last 7 or 8 years since the underage academies came in, I think we're going to see the players who came in at 15, 16 into that system are going to drop out after they go 19, 20 and fall back into the junior standards. I think we're going to see a huge rising of all tides in the next 5 to 10 years.
It's like what I said on social media the other day about 10 years ago, asking the FAI about an under-23s international side, because it's the same sort of thing in the sense of you lose players from an international pathway that maybe don't necessarily play soccer, or you lose players to other sports. It's the same filter system, and I think what you're saying there realistically is we need to make sure that these players who necessarily don't make it at national league level, there is an opportunity for them to keep in the game, and that'll help expand it. But like, I've had conversations with people over the last number of years, and the one thing I've always said is players nowadays are getting a lot more technical. The younger players are getting a lot more technical ability than the players who we would have seen when the league would have started. And that's due to the more hands-on coaching at academy level or underage League of Ireland level, where they're playing games and where the elite play the elite. And I think it's only going to benefit everybody.
Okay, I'm going to say this. I'm going to get myself in a lot of trouble with a lot of people for what I'm about to say, but I think part of the problem has been at the door of the FAI. Have they done a lot of stuff really well around the academy stuff? Absolutely. Are we seeing a better standard of player coming through? Absolutely. 10 out of 10 for all of that. As far as I'm concerned, the last 7 years have been phenomenal in terms of that technical growth of players and the experience of getting what they're getting. But I'm going to challenge our listeners to do two things. Google 2 things in the next few minutes when you're finished watching the show, because I think this will tell you all you need to see about where the women's game is in development in terms of other sports. Google the strategic plan for the FAI women's football that was launched by the previous head of women's football, Hannah Dingley, a couple of months back. Google that and read the document. It won't take you long. It's not very good. Then go Google the one that came out yesterday for women's rugby in this island. They are poles apart. There is no comparison between the two. It's a phenomenal plan that came out from the rugby yesterday. I will say we do a bit of work with the rugby. We're contracted to the rugby to do certain things. So take that caveat as you will. But the document itself is phenomenal. The ambitions, the goals, the targets that they've set themselves over the next 4 or 5 years. There are targets in it. There's nothing in the FAI. There's no content at all. And I think that for me is the nub of where we're struggling at the moment in this sport, is the confusion around the head of women's football unit. My opinion, Eileen Gleeson should never have left that role. She was the perfect person when she got the job. She's hugely experienced in the sport at national level, international level, a bit of an experience in across the water with Glasgow and what have you. But her actual academic background was in sports development. I felt she was the absolute person to push on domestic sport. She got sidetracked by the women's international team, and we know how that's gone since. It's not neat. It's not pretty. She's still employed by the FAI. She's nowhere to be seen within the FAI. And I think the FAI need to nail that down. I know they've got stuff going on this week that isn't going to help matters, but that seems to have been put to bed today with a statement that came out from the FAI, and someone has stepped down after some poor choices, maybe 15, 20 years ago. That's done now. Put behind them and move on. But they need to get this head of women's football thing nailed down. Is Eileen back in the frame for it?
Forget the head of women's football. The head of football, and director of football.
I don't think it matters.
They're not going to do anything until they nail that role down.
I don't think it matters. I don't think the head of football matters. I think
that's a bigger priority for them to fix. I think, and that they're not going to touch for me.
They have the right person. Have the right person contracted to them at the moment, and I think Eileen Gleeson should go back in that role and stay in that role. Give her a 10-year contract and let her actually get on with the job, because I think women's football, and this is a problem that women's football is going to have. I told you it's going to follow up with people in the next few minutes. This is a problem that women's football have in this country. We're moving into much closer links with the League of Ireland. Most of our teams, I think 10 of the 12 teams in the league at the moment, are connected to a League of Ireland club. You could argue that DLR and UCD are probably two sides of the same coin. They're very separate clubs, but they're the same kind of setup. And we're looking at, and PMAT, the only really independent side that aren't relying on the League of Ireland men's side. I don't think the men's side of the League of Ireland, if they're being honest with themselves, really care about the women's game. Some do, most, and maybe just about most, don't. And I think that's the big problem. And getting in bed with the men's is great in terms of resources, in terms of experience, in terms of resources, in terms of money, in terms of facilities, coaching, all of that sort of stuff. But I think when it boils down to it, the women's side of the house needs to put their hand up and make sure that they're represented themselves. We can see what happens in Treaty. Treaty have put in a 50-50 share, and look at the difference in them in the last 2 or 3 seasons. There's no comparison. And I'm looking at
stop you.
Yep.
What would an FAI Cup final for Treaty do? Like you asked about Bowser.
Huge. Massive. But I think it also is justification, even of the route they've taken, because we look at now the finances maybe that are coming into the Champions League. Athlone might get a bit of that this year, but the Women's Champions League prize money is going up all the time. And if we get through a few rounds in Europe, which again, it looks really unlikely given the seedings and given the draws of getting through what you'd need to get through, which is essentially 4 or 5, maybe 6 games, depending on draws, it's unlikely in the short term. But it's definitely a target that, same as the men, have worked on it for 23, 22 years since Shells nearly beat Deportivo in Lansdowne. I don't know if you were at that game. It was a phenomenal night for the League of Ireland. Deportivo 3 or 4 months off 3 or 4 months off the. I think there was a World Cup involved. There was players who had been at the World Cup, that'd been in the Champions League, the semi-final of the Champions League the year before. And Shels held them 0-0 in Lansdowne. But not only that, they really they performed. They stood up and they were counted. Wes Houlihan was immense that night, amongst others. And you look back at it now, and the women's are at that stage, and maybe even the UEFA women's are at that stage. And I think it's time for us to really put to really put a plan in place. And I think the absence of a leader for the women's game within the FAI, a voice that's actually shouting for women's football, and that's why I think it's even more important than who their boss is going to be. They need to be shouting that for women's football at all levels, not just.
I'm literally spent the last 5-6 minutes while you've been rambling.
Sorry,
looking at the strategic plan for the RFU.
It's class.
Like, it talks about money, and I have no affiliation with the RFU. I was involved in rugby when I was younger, no involvement now. And I'm looking at it now, and I'm looking at like even they've even mentioned the sort of impacts that like in Leona Bar in Bristol. Like, we see that sort of effects. I'm a massive WNBA basketball fan, and I see that with the likes of Caitlin Clarke with the WNBA. She's done the same. We've got these sort of people in our game that, like, if I turned around to a random Joe Blogs on the street and said, "Do you know this player's story? Do you know this player's story?" They'd probably say no. Couldn't even tell you who they are. Whereas, and I think you're right in what you're saying. And if you're going to have something that's going to grow, it's going to the devil is in the detail, and it's just as if. And I said it at the time, I'll say it again. The FAI strategic plan was just as if we need to get this out here. Let's get it out. Let's boom. And like, it's not working. The way the Irish women's team at the minute is, like, I even got a response to a tweet my tweet the other day, even asking about meetings between Carla Ward and Dave Connell, and how's that about it potentially not even taking place and things like that. And like, that in itself, if that's the case, that they haven't met before, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, but there's no joined up thinking. But there hasn't been joined up thinking for decades.
For a long time.
Yeah.
And it's not just turning around saying Carla Ward hasn't. There hasn't been for a long time. But then again, like, I even tweeted the other day, Dave Connell should be the most recognised, the most applauded person within the FAI. The work he has done with getting underage teams to major competitions and never gets the recognition it deserves, never gets the thing. Whereas it's all about, like, the thing about what I find about a lot of women's sport and with people when it comes to commitment to sort of growing the game and stuff like that, a lot of times you see buzzwords, you see, all these fancy words written down, all these sort of things. But what I want to see from the FAI is leaders who are actually going to take action and actually going to grow. The one thing that the FAI have done in the last couple of years for women's football that I really, really liked was the introduction of the transition year course that was done in conjunction with Fingal. That to me was something that was superb. There was, we were getting the talk of a development squad earlier in the year. We were getting talk of under 23s. We were getting talk of, you even posted about the universities. Show us somebody who's going to actually be like, okay, let me have a look at all these ideas. How can we sort of do this? How can we approach our sponsors? How can we approach our stakeholders and get the support that we need? Because even when I look at, say, the Sky Ireland awards that go out every year where players get given financial recognitions, it's always just senior internationals. There's never a recognition of an Ireland underage international coming through. This can help you with your college fund. This can help you with this. It's always, let's give the senior girls the more money. Let's give it. It's all about, the one thing I find, it's keeping the money at the top, whether it's the men's international football or the women's.
We don't have to go very far locally to see examples of how that doesn't work. Take Dundalk. Okay, they might be right now at the top of the first division at the moment, but the reality is, 5 years ago, they were in Europe. They got a huge payout from a really good European run. The governance and the ownership is the whole debacle up there for the last couple of years. Fans have been through turmoil. The whole club has been through turmoil, and they self-imploded. And they had the resources, they had the experience in theory, but it just didn't work out for them. So putting a drop down, or Dundalk had very little academy stuff going on. I know they brought in a couple of people in recent years, and they've there are some green shoots there, but the previous edition really didn't have a fantastic record in terms of producing players or producing results at that level. Not that results are the key, but even the players coming through, I think Ryan O'Kane is probably the only one that comes to mind from that's actually come through the Athlone Academy. Sorry, the Dundalk Academy. He moved on.
Owen Kenny come through as well.
This week. Who? Owen Kenny.
Kenny.
Yeah, potentially. Yeah. So, but we're picking one or two individuals. You go to Shamrock Rovers, we'd be here all night. And my point is that you look at the approach of the two clubs. Shamrock Rovers have built it from the ground up. They've put in the academy. They've put in a proper structured academy that's resourced, and now it's becoming self-sufficient. It's taken a decade, but that's where we are. We need to have clubs producing players, 90% going into their first team or going to other teams in the league, and that one or two stars moving across the water and bringing in a few euros to pay the bills for the next season. And so we're looking at
we've never seen a women's player go abroad for money in this country. We've never seen it happen yet, and it's something that's
because we haven't got our house in order in terms of clubs and nailing these players down. Like, it's all well and good giving a girl, whether it's 100 euros expenses or whether it's a fee or part-time wage or full-time wage. I'm not quite sure where we are in the league with all of that, but we need to be, if we're going to bring a player in, we can't be losing her on a free, and whatever the resources are needed to make sure that doesn't happen. Because if you take Katie Keane's move to Leicester, we did hint at it last week on the show. We didn't break.
We knew where it was going, but we just didn't. We didn't want to be a fairness to the club, and
it's the clubs. It's the club and the player who both clubs and the player who get to decide when that goes out. But we knew it was happening, and you're looking at it going, I don't know if there's a fee involved, but there's probably not. There's probably a release clause when she signed from Athlone at the start of the season, because that would have been an option for her. But clubs need to be hard and say, no, if you're not prepared to sign a contract with us, we're not signing you. Look at Owen Elding on the men's side of things in Sligo. He is like the CS goal last week. It's absolutely sick.
I'm just speaking of Owen Elding. I've literally just got on my other screen here. I had Twitter open, and the headline reads from John Fallon reads, Juventus joined the list of people.
So Owen Elding will probably go for big money and probably very quickly, because let's be honest, Sligo.
Look at Mason Melia. Big money. But the thing about it is, and you know what? I'm going to turn back to Tara O'Hanlon. It hasn't worked out for Man City. If she ever makes her debut due to injury, I hope she gets back. I hope she gets. But like, she was insistent on writing into her contract that if she makes her debut, Pima get a certain fee or a certain amount of money. Like, the player didn't have to do that. But like, you don't look at
Johnny Kenny did the same at Sligo. Johnny Kenny signed a new contract with Sligo a couple of weeks before he signed for Celtic, purely because he wanted to up the value that Sligo were going to get for his sale. It still wasn't great, but it could have been nothing. And so that's
Abby Larkin went for nothing. But then again, the other side of it is, and I know we have to mention it. And Russia Littlejohn was only a 6-month contract, and like you then started tapping into. We understood why Rovers tapped into that opportunity with someone like Russia, but like, then again, you're going to pay players big money to come, and it doesn't necessarily work out. Like, I think one thing for me that is a massive coup in what the FAI have done. I think licensing will start to get contracts in order over the next couple of years, and will force clubs to sort of get that in order. Because
my point, I'm sorry to cut across you, because I agree with you, but my point is, if it's been forced on the club by the FAI, and this is going back to the whole League of Ireland ethos over the last decades of letting players, of not doing our homework right to allow players to leave willy-nilly for peanuts, going right back to Seamus Coleman. And I feel like I'm going on a very Sligo Rovers tangent here, but there are examples across the entire league. They're just the ones that are local to me. The clubs need to want to do it themselves, and that's the problem. Is that the bar needs to be raised by the clubs, and we're seeing the likes of Athlone seem to be able to hold on to players like Maddie Gibson is in her third year, maybe fourth year with the club at this moment.
Definitely, yeah.
And so to keep a player of that quality, okay, there's maybe personal issues. I know her partner is playing with Galway United, and so there's maybe other reasons other than just football for her to still be in this part of the world.
She could pick any club in the league.
Yeah, 100%. But
just on that, and I'm going to back your point up here. I think Shells have done themselves a massive disservice over the last couple of years, because the amount of players that they have produced, that they, because things haven't, young players maybe haven't been tied down to contracts when they've got into the first team, that they've just walked over the League of Ireland clubs, and Shells have never got
a penny
for it. And they've developed these players. Like, you look around the League of Ireland right now, how many players, especially in the Dublin clubs, have come through Shells Academy? Quite a lot of them. Quite a lot of them. And but yet they never got a penny out. I think you're right in what you're saying, and I think that's the only way to sort of improve the infrastructure. It's like Wexford having to pay money to get Aoife Kelly to buy Aoife Kelly off Shamrock Rovers. She's worth every penny of what they paid for, but like, that's the start of it. And I think that's the sort of thing that we need to see, because then that means that clubs are getting treated properly for their players. And if clubs get treated properly for the players that they develop, then they will realise there's a lot more to this.
Yeah.
Hopefully, then that will help get their house in order.
My understanding of it is, and I could be wrong here, and I could be doing a disservice to some of the clubs in the men's league, and the women's league, I think, is no different, is that as far as the club player contract is concerned, it's the bog standard FAI template registration form that basically acts as the contract for most of these signings. So with a couple of additions added on, probably handwriting, like, it's very amateur hour across the league. And I think we're looking at teams like Shamrock Rovers, Pats as well with the Amelia deal, have obviously got their, and Bows, to be fair, have had a couple of examples of it in recent months and years with Evan Ferguson or what have you. Get your house in order. Get your admin side of things in order. I had an interesting conversation with someone from a different sport on a different, totally unrelated matter during the week. And the exchange went something like this. They said how they were the only people in their particular sport in the country that didn't have a full-time CEO effectively. And I said, well, like, why is that? And they go, oh, we don't have the money. And I was like, but your budget is 20 times the price of a CEO effectively in the marketplace. You know, like, high 5-figure salary, you have a budget 15 to 20 to 25 times that. It's your choice where that budget goes, and you're making the choice not to put it into a CEO who's going to not only return his salary or her salary to the bottom line, but probably many multiples of that, and really grow the operation on a professional basis. They were like, oh, no, we couldn't possibly do that. So while the mindset is there that we're happy with volunteers, we're happy with amateurs, we're happy with just ticking the box and using the template form that comes out for player registration, we are never going to be in a situation where clubs have what they need. And the reality is, I'm sorry, this whole episode has gone off on a complete tangent and a bit of a rant from me, but until clubs decide we are going to invest in our structures, we're going to invest in our resources in terms of where we spend them. So we're taking in a 15 or 16-year-old. What is the plan for that player? One of the things in that IRFU women's plan, and it definitely is worth reading for anybody interested in developing women's sport, was they introduced us to Anna at different stages of her career. She starts as a 6-year-old girl, and it talks about what she needs and what she wants and what the IRFU and the clubs and the provinces have to offer her. Brings her, I think it jumps then to maybe 18 or 16, and it's every 10 years her experience, and ends up with her as a 36-year-old with a baby in her arms going,
if anybody is listening, I'm literally going to post a picture onto my own Twitter account right now of what Breifne is talking about. Yeah,
and that for me was the standout. Now, the whole thing is excellent, but for me, that was kind of one of the things I thought, now this is top notch. Anyway, let's get back to the football, because we've been on a bit of a rant. Any club wants to hear more about where we think they could improve things from an outsider's point of view, that's absolutely fine. Get in touch with either of us. We're quite happy to have a chat with you about ideas and where we think you can make small improvements that will see significant gains for you, free of charge as well. On my count, Aaron might charge you, but I doubt it. Let's move back to some of the games. We haven't talked about some of the games over the weekend. Shells and Galway, they played, two of the top sides in the league. We knew this was probably the game of the weekend. It didn't really disappoint, but Shells did sneak a late Kate Mooney effort. What a ball through for her goal. Was she offside? Was she onside? Doesn't really matter. The ball was given. Shells into the next round.
I was sat in the Riverside, and initially before the ball was played, she was offside. And I even said it to her. I said it to her then after the game, and she just bended that run so slightly to come back onside. Do you know what it was? It was the movement that was forward, who's in the form of her life. And you can see that partnership with Mackenzie Anthony, how well it is. Like, it's 25 goals in all competitions from the two of them. Mackenzie scored the first one. Phil Trill maybe wasn't too pleased with the first goal in the sense of he had a suspicion of a potential offside in the first goal. Then the equaliser from, I think it was Olasolo got the equaliser. A wicked header or a non-Alex Kavanagh type defensive header, the way she headed it back towards goal. It was actually Amanda Smith with the goal, was it? Sorry. It might have been Smith with the goal. The way she headed it back towards her own goal, and then it was calmly finished. And when it goes 1-1, like Galway just were relentless then for the last period. And I thought if any team was going to score, it was going to be Galway. But that Shelbourne characteristic that they have this year that I sort of gave them awful stick for in previous years of when they're 1-0 up or 1-1 in a game or drawing a game late on, that they tend to have that character checked a little bit last year. This year, I think their fitness levels, the way they're able to go to the end. It was a really, really nice finish from Kate Mooney. Good work from Mackenzie Anthony when you actually watch the goal to shield the defender off. But I think realistically for me, if that had went to extra time, I wouldn't have said Galway weren't deserving of at least extra time in that game. And I think Shells just showed their champions character in the end to get over the line.
Yeah, first appearance of the season as well. She didn't come off the bench for Galway, but I've spoken about it on the show a few times. A personal favourite, I think, when I've watched her play for Treaty originally and now for Galway. Amy Madden back on the team sheet for the first time since pre-season friendly. So she's had a rough time with injuries over the last year or so. So great to see her back.
I thought, and you know what? I thought all the Galway players who were involved, I thought they were, even the ones who did come on were brilliant. I thought Roll Olasolo off the bench was brilliant. It was a really entertaining game. It was one of these that if you're a Shells fan, you probably had your heart in your mouth a little bit. If you're a Galway fan, you were sort of a little bit on edge as well. It was a real cup tie. The weather didn't really help, but it was a fantastic, enjoyable game of football. I think it shows as you've said earlier when you mentioned the league table about the standard gaps. Like when these sort of teams play each other, there's not an awful lot in them. And with cup football, it's probably going to be one that Galway let slip, if I'm being honest. I think Phil Trill, when he looks back at it, he probably think, yeah, we should have won that game.
Yeah, absolutely. Final game of the round. Second last game of the round. I forgot about Friday night's game. Shamrock Rovers, Waterford. Fairly routine here. Just Waterford not really up to it. And they were always going to need to be 100% to challenge Rovers here. It just didn't quite happen for them. Rovers fairly comfortable.
Yeah, apart from conceding the goal from the corner, Rovers are comfortable enough. We watched it ourselves together because I wanted your opinion on it. I don't think it's a foul on Summer Lawless. I just think it's smart work from the Waterford attacker who sort of holds her off. I think it was Mia Lenihan sort of keeps her off, and like for Roberts can see the sloppy set piece like that. I don't think Collie O'Neill will be too pleased, but it was a good response. Lauren Walsh putting into her own goal. It was a superb delivery from Melissa O'Kane, but then. For me, Gary Hunt won't be happy with the last two goals in the sense of they had opportunities to clear them set pieces, and they just didn't get them clear. And I think Maria Reynolds' finish is a nice finish, but for Roberts, yeah, it was a comfortable enough win in the end. And I think Colin O'Neill will be just happy to see his name into the half of the next round. I think Anya O'Gorman continues to put in really good performances with Shamrock Rovers. I know at the start of the year was a little bit of critical of wasn't scoring enough goals. Not necessarily going to be an out-and-out goal scorer going forward, but I think she's someone who continues to add massive experience in that Rovers team, and it was a decent enough performance from Rovers in the end.
Yeah. Final game of the round was, of course, Friday night, the non-league clash of Newbridge Town and Whitehall Rangers. Both these sides preparing for the semi-finals of the Amateur Cup in the coming weeks. Opportunity for a team. We knew there was going to be a team progressing through for the first time in a decade from the National League rounds. Smart money probably would have been on Whitehall, given the recent results over the last couple of seasons in terms of tradition in these two teams. But Newbridge hadn't quite read the script. Missed penalty from Rachel McLaughlin. She won't thank me for saying that. In the second half, denied, I suppose, Whitehall the opportunity to go ahead late on. But 3 minutes later, it was Rachel Kavanagh, I think, Rebecca Kavanagh, who hit the front, and a great finish from her to put Newbridge Town into the last 8 of the competition. I spoke to some of the people in the club immediately afterwards, and they were absolutely delighted. They'll be even happier, I suppose, with the draw, that they avoided maybe the absolute big guns. But Bows, it's a tough draw enough. It's always going to be a tough draw. Can we see them scoring against Bows, or are we looking at that kind of no League of Ireland side?
I'm gonna get myself shot here, because I actually watched the Shells game with two friends from this club on Saturday, and I kept winding them up saying they were going to draw Shells. Yeah, it's probably a draw in the sense of they're avoiding Shells at Athlone, but realistically, it's going to be a case of in the semi-final, in the quarterfinals, of how low they can keep the score down. Now, in fairness, they actually won this game missing Brooke Dunn as well, who's been playing in centre midfield for them, the former Females United and Kilkenny United goalkeeper, who was with the Irish Deaf team playing in I think it was the European Championships, and actually got player of the tournament. Interesting, another ex-League of Ireland player played on that team. Any idea who it is?
Oh, I do know.
Cork City.
O'Brien. Natasha O'Brien?
Natalie O'Brien, yeah.
There's also a link back to Newbridge Town. No, maybe not. Actually, no, there's another girl from Sligo, Laura McGuinn, was playing on that team as well. So I did recognize a few faces on that team, all right.
Interesting that Whitehall were massive favourites in terms of the bookies' favourites to win this game. Newbridge haven't really had the women's team at this level. I think it's their first year in the EWFL top league, and they're into the two sides meet again. I think not this Saturday after, in the Amateur Cup semi-finals. And listen, it's a good opportunity for Newbridge. I think the only sort of sour patch from a Newbridge point of view is due to work being done on their pitch in Newbridge, that they actually had to play the game with Females United. It's the only real thing where it would have been a real nice club day out if they could have played it in Newbridge.
But you look down to that team and you'll see a whole host of girls who've played in the LOI Academy from Newbridge, whether it's CK United or Wexford or a few other teams that have kind of come in from that neck of the woods. I think there's one or two players who had experience at Treaty maybe as well over the years. Rachel McLaughlin, I had the pleasure of working with her. It's 22 years ago now. I'm showing my age. She was at Dublin City back in the day. We would have played against a Raheny side that had youngsters such as Diane Caldwell and Shauna Cook in midfield. So that'll age her. She will not thank me for that. She did miss the penalty, unfortunately, that might have put Whitehall through in this situation. But they'll be looking more towards the amateur ranks anyway, in terms of that cup semi-final that's coming up in, I think, is it next week? So yeah, there'll be plenty of interest at that level. But again, you're looking at that team, that they fit that profile we talked about earlier, with girls in their late 30s, early 40s, still involved, maybe just not quite have the legs anymore. No offense to the 3 or 4 girls in that who fit that bill in each of the teams from the non-league setup over the last couple of weeks. Let's quickly talk about we've run out of time, but we're going to keep going because we've got so much to talk about. Let's talk about the women's national team first, and then we'll finish up with talking about the All-Ireland Sports Cup at the weekend. There's a couple of other bits and pieces to chat about as well. So
you've changed the name of the cup again, have you? All-Ireland Sports Cup.
The FAI don't seem to know what to call it, so I just call them, make up names. It doesn't matter. I think
AIC, I think, is the new.
Yeah, I heard it called the AIC All Ireland Cup, which I thought was funny because AIC sounded like a company. One of the commentators on the League of Ireland a couple of weeks ago, League LOI TV. Let's talk about the Ireland team. Another 4-0 defeat for Ireland in America. Bit of an experimental side put out by Carla Ward. Do we really read too much into this? It's just kind of a box ticking exercise. I don't know if we've got much out of any of these games, really, other than maybe the commercial aspect of things.
Commercial aspect and the opportunity to spend more time with the squad is probably the only things we got out of it. Performance-wise, I didn't really watch the first game because it was on at 2 o'clock in the morning and I wasn't staying up on a work night. I'm not going to lie. But I watched the second game.
Aaron. The joys have been self-employed.
I watched the full second game, and the heat in Cincinnati seemed to be a big thing. Like even before the game, you could sort of see Carla Ward sort of mentioning and deflecting towards 3 changes at halftime inflicted due to players feeling unwell. The question I would have in that situation is, should the FAI not have stepped in there and said, hold on a minute, where if players are asking after 20 minutes to come off because they don't feel well, that's not really player welfare. Number one. It was always going to be difficult against the USA. These games were plotted in before Carla Ward sort of took over, but like at the time of the year is never ideal either. Playing the Americans then, like you look at that Ireland side, how many of the Ireland side hadn't really played games even before the last two playoffs. This, if you look at Championship, probably finished late April. WSL finished the first week in May. A lot of players haven't played a lot of games, and timing wasn't ideal. Did we learn an awful lot out of these games? No. The only thing I did learn the biggest thing I did learn out of these games is if Courtney Brosnan gets injured, Ireland are screwed.
Yeah, well, we've been talking about this for a long time on that show. Yeah. I actually had the opposite. I stayed up for the game on Thursday night, Friday morning. Quite enjoyed it, to be honest. It was a great, entertaining spectacle. How much we got out of it, very little, I'd imagine. Some nice involvement. Chloe Mustaki impressed me. I thought she did all right. I thought on the right side, Jessie Stapleton just got found out by Alyssa Thompson, who was just, and that's not a criticism of Stapleton. I think anybody
Jessie Stapleton, I'm going to say this now, Jessie Stapleton should not be playing right back for Ireland.
No,
she's not a right back. Jessie, if you're gonna play Jessie has to be either playing centre back or sitting in the hole in the six. You can't play Jessie on the right side. That's to me. I was watching it because even in Turner's Cross and Parky Queeve, she was playing at the right side of the defense. I started watching it, and like I felt for her because you look at the player, she's marking. It's so difficult, and even all she's constantly having to do, being a player out of the season, is run up and down, run, because the Americans just kept coming. And like in the second game in particular, Alyssa Thomas, Rose Lavelle, players like that off the bench, like it's scary, and it's hard to fathom, and like in the sense of like people need to realize we're in a stage where we've lost 4 or 5 really experienced older players. Some other players probably coming towards the end, the latter stages of their international career. Like this playoff in October is absolutely huge. Yeah. If we don't win this, it makes World Cup qualification so much harder.
Yeah. And let's talk about the positives from this game. So Hayley Nolan getting off the bench. I thought I was impressed to see her get another cap. Delighted for her on her second coming in the Ireland squad. Deirdre Bradley being on the bench. We've talked about her on the show plenty of times. She's obviously with Durham for the last couple of seasons. Amazed it's taken this long to have her in an Ireland squad. And it would seem to be accidental, and then she ends up on the bench. Like, what's this thing of players being called in for training and then featuring in the squad is crazy. We saw at the World Cup under Vera with Izzy, came in just to be a number at training and ends up not only on the plane but in the squad, and also she played I think in every game over there at the World Cup. Like
the Izzy one was interesting because even when you look back at it, like we were told the first week they met up, we were told that she was only there because Megan Campbell hadn't reported yet. And then Vera sort of said, because I asked Vera then after the first game about why she played Izzy against Zambia, and she sort of said, I felt it was right to give her the game. And then all of a sudden the murmurs about Megan Campbell start coming out, and then it's okay. If Megan's not there, there's a real possibility Izzy can get into this squad, and it's like it was just one of them that it was probably I'd love to sit down and actually have a chat with Izzy and ask, what was that couple of weeks like for you? You told you're not in the initial squad, then you're asked to come in and train, and sort of then you go to Australia. It's stuff of dreams.
Yeah, 100%. So Ireland team, the 2 playoff games, they are the priority now. Can we win them? Can we get promoted to the?
It's probably the best draw we could have got, in the sense of Belgium aren't really consistent. Yes, they beat England, but then again they're consistent one week, they're not the next week. Can we beat them? It'll take a 9 out of 10 performance in both games in order to beat them. First leg is at the Aviva Stadium before a second leg away in literally about 50 minutes outside of Brussels. It's going to be difficult.
Yeah, so if you're listening to this and you're interested, get a ticket for the Aviva game when they come on sale. If they're not on sale already, I don't think they are. But when they come on sale, do go along, do support the girls in green, and hopefully we can power them across the line to a playoff promotion, which will be absolutely amazing, given the way the season panned out, particularly that defeat in Slovenia, which we won't keep harping back to. Wrapping up the show for us today.
I still have nightmares about that game in Slovenia.
Let's talk before we look at the fixtures for the weekend. There's two things I want to chat about. One is the departures from the league this week. We touched on it earlier on, but Ruisha Littlejohn has left Shamrock Rovers at the end of her arrangement. She was there, didn't quite work out. Let's be honest. The results probably not what they would have wanted, both in terms of her impact on games and no, yeah, she scored an absolute worldie from a restart, but like in terms of a sustained contribution, probably not what Shamrock Rovers would have been looking for out of that.
I don't think it worked in terms of bums on seat either. And do you know what? I don't think I texted this to you, but I've been sort of thinking over the last couple of days, just looking back ahead of our Earley stint with Shells. Reminds me, so it's very, very similar, where it starts off in this mad fanfare and then it sort of simmers out.
Peters out.
To me, it's
what's the chances she signs with Athlone and goes to the Champions League with them for the next two? How funny would that be? It's unlikely, but it would be funny.
I say there's a 0% chance of happening.
Yeah, 100%. I'd say it's 100% chance of not happening. In terms of the other note I have here, Katie Keane, obviously we touched on last week on the show, announced during the week, Leicester City, 3-year contract. It's a good move for her. Is it a good move for Leicester City? Katie hasn't exactly right this season. Very impressive last year.
If you look at what she's doing with the Ireland under-19s, it's a great move for Leicester. If you look at what's happened this year in terms of with performances with Shamrock Rovers, hasn't necessarily been great. But then again, is she going to go in and jump straight into Leicester's first team? Probably not. I wouldn't be surprised if she spends the first 6 months, couple of months on the bench, and then goes out on loan for the second half of the season, gets some game time maybe in the championship. But there's no doubt she has potential. I think because if you even look back, even before she went to Athlone, I sort of said to you, I thought she should have been the Shelbourne #1 at that stage, even at 16, 17. So has she got potential to be? Yes, absolutely. Could she end up being Ireland's next #1 goalkeeper? Probably.
Yeah, and I think her performance last year for Athlone will show you exactly her contribution. She was probably as influential as any other player on that squad in terms of making them league champions last year. So she definitely has the talent. It's gone a bit off the boil this year with Shamrock Rovers, but maybe this step into full-time football is what she needs at this stage of her career. So the best of luck to her as she crosses the channel and goes to Leicester, to maybe push on and see where she.
The other side of it for me, when you look at it in terms of the likes of the League of Ireland awards, when do you ever see a goalkeeper winning, say, a main award? And that's how impactful she was last year, winning the Young Player of the Year. That's how impactful she was for me. And I fully no doubt we probably haven't seen. We've only seen 20-30% of what she's capable of, I think.
Yeah, I think it's an exciting future for her, both in England, but also potentially in the Irish jersey over the next decade or so. A real challenger to Courtney Brosnan, a proper challenger to Courtney Brosnan, I think, in terms of that position over the next decade. Sticking with goalkeepers, big news out of UEFA, I suppose, and FIFA this weekend or this week. New goalkeeping rules, and you reckon a former women's Premier Division player would be very happy if this had been brought in a couple of years ago.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I think Newbridge Burke would have been very happy if this new rule had been brought in a long time ago, especially over the holding of the ball for so long. It's something that she's always sort of. You can obviously if they have the hair on the ground, sort of counting when players are holding the ball too long, and I think it's a good rule. But it maybe next if FIFA would like to potentially sort of when a player rolls around the pitch till they get a free kick, screaming and shouting, and then gets up. Maybe
I was actually thinking about this before I saw the news today. So just for clarification, if you're listening to this and haven't heard the news, if a goalkeeper holds the ball for longer than 8 seconds in their possession, the opposition gets a corner kick. So a really big, I suppose, penalty for holding onto the ball and trying to time waste in play. It's never been enforced before, so it'll be interesting to see how it's actually enforced by referees. But I have an idea for a goalkeeping addition to a rule, and that is, we see this habit now around the 22-minute mark, 23-minute mark, where the goalkeeper goes down injured and takes a break, and both sides are at it. So you could have 2 breaks in each half where the players get to regroup and get a bit of instruction from the bench. I think if the goalkeeper goes down injured, your sub-keeper has to replace them instantly, and then you can put the first goalkeeper back on at the next break in play. So all of a sudden, if you have to play a phase of play with your backup goalkeeper, I think all of a sudden you get a very different response.
We had a goalkeeper. Ireland had a goal. Courtney Brosnan suspended for a game for time wasting, and it happens way too often with goal. Like, you even seen it during the USA game where she went down to get them a breather as well. 100%. I think something needs to be done about that, because
everyone's giving that, and rightly so.
It's happening too long. It's been happening for way too long.
Yeah, 100%. And that brings us to the end of the topics we want to chat about. Let's move straight on to the fixtures, and we'll try and get through these as quickly as we can.
Before we run through the fixtures, just give the reminder of the full FAI Cup draw.
Oh, yeah, sure. I can run through that quickly if you give me a second.
Because there is an absolute belter of a tie. It's 2 very good ties in that round for me.
Okay, so the FAI Cup draw did take place during the weekend. The quarterfinals, 8 teams as you'd expect. DLR Waves host Treaty United. Newbridge Town, their reward for their win is Bohemians at home. Ferns United will play Athlone Town, the league champions, and then the reigning cup champion Shells, they host Shamrock Rovers. I'm presuming you're talking about those last 2 clashes.
Yeah. Shamrock Rovers, Shelbourne have never beaten Shamrock Rovers in Talca Park. This is interesting.
Bookies take
Can they break that habit?
Well, it's going to be interesting. I also think that DLR Treaty game has the potential to be an absolute cracker.
I don't think DLR are where they were at the start of the season when Treaty blew them away. I think they're a better side now than they were at the start of the year. I think it'll be a much closer game than it was.
Well, I'd argue Treaty are the same. Treaty are much better than they were at the start of the year, but it's going to be close. It's going to be tight. I think Newbridge are going to struggle against Bows. I think they're quite happy to have got a home draw, and then hopefully manage to kind of do that. It's the right time of year as the non-leagues, as the men's division start coming back in, and then maybe hopefully get that in Station Road. But it's going to be interesting. I think Bows should progress through that. Who are the other 3 that you'd see coming through that? Those games, of course, taking place 16th of August, so about 6 weeks' time.
Bows, Athlone, Treaty. Should be Shells, but I wouldn't be 100% confident.
Oh, interesting times ahead. Let's take a quick look back at the Avenir Cup draw, and we have.
He's done it again.
Listen, they paid for their sponsorship to get in the cup. The All Ireland Cup is on this weekend. Glentoran and Bohemians, 3:00 on Saturday afternoon. That is in the Oval, I think. Shells and Treaty in Talca Park at 4:00, while Galway United and Shamrock Rovers do battle at 5. And finally, completing the hour gap on every single game. It's a long day for anyone who's going to be watching these games. You get the first half of everything. And then Wexford and Peamount, they go through. And that is the format for the semi-finals as well. So the winners of...
You are going to Shelbourne versus Treaty United. Please be advised, people, that the All-Ireland hurling semi-final is on in Croke Park at 5:00. So parking around Talca Park will be manic.
Yeah, so go early. And even then, bring parking. Take public transport if you can. Interesting times going ahead there. Let's talk about that game first. Shells and Treaty. Can Treaty pull off a surprise here? I think they're an outside bet for I'm about to say it again, for the All-Ireland Cup. It depends how Shells take it. If they take a first team out and kill the game off, like we saw with Athlone last weekend, Treaty could struggle here. But if Shells rotate the squad at all, we could see Treaty maybe with an opportunity here. They're capable of beating Shells today.
If you look at when Treaty played Shells in the league, it was defensive errors was the difference. They were well in that game. I cannot imagine Owen Warren will want to risk anything of of that sort of note. I can't imagine that Shells will go changed. Like if I'm Shells, like if you look at Shell's bench against, you look at Shell's bench, like even lately, like there were a lot of youngsters on that bench. Like granted, they've the likes of Noel, they have Noel, Gabby Del Pico, the Roman McLaughlin was on it. The rest of them are younger kids. So I can't imagine that he will make wholesale changes. I think if they're in control of the game and well up, he will bring some of them players on. But I think Owen will try to do what Colin Fortune done this week, and it'll be full strength. It'll be very difficult for Treaty, but it's good football. Anything can happen. And a reminder, I don't think these games go to extra time either. They didn't last year. I think it's straight to penalties.
Glentoran and Bowes, opportunity for the Northern Ireland side to progress?
I'd make Glentoran favourites in this game. I'd make Glentoran's favourites. I think Bowes' inconsistencies worry me a little bit, but it's a good opportunity for them to get to a semi-final of a cup. I wouldn't be surprised if this one is a late winner or it goes to penalties. So I don't think there'll be an awful lot between the two.
Yeah, in terms of the overall competition, how important is it for a Northern Ireland side to be in the semi-final draw?
Yeah, I think in Northern Ireland sides, whether it's been in the semi-final draw or we see multiple teams in the quarterfinal draw, is massive. I think the league, you might as well get rid of this competition if it's just League of Ireland clubs only in the quarterfinals, semi-finals all the way through. I think the Northern teams, when they're capable, they can show up and they can beat the League of Ireland teams on their day. I wouldn't be surprised if Glentoran do get to a semi-final, but I think it's important that they're as competitive in these competitions. And like as we spoke about with the last round of group games, there was only really one team from the northern section that were sort of near enough almost out mathematically. They would have needed a massive swing, and that was Lisburn. Whereas the rest of them still had something to play for. I think that's as important as well, as that they're not just out after two games, and the last game is a bit of a nothing game. And I think Glentoran will definitely put it up to Bowes, and I think they will be favourites.
The two late kickoffs, Galway and Shamrock Rovers, and Wexford and Peamount. Your thoughts on these two games?
No love lost between Galway and Shamrock Rovers when it comes to Phil Trill. Anyway, you can see the bit of an edge there and I expect a bit of an edge in this game. Like Russia Littlejohn's moment of magic when they met in the league, Galway still come out on top. Galway have a habit of getting the result against Shamrock Rovers, and I think, as I said to you before, Shamrock Rovers will still look back at that game against Lisburn where they lost. Could have been a home quarter final. I think Galway will do it.
And then finally, Wexford and Peamount. Probably the most open game of the lot.
Yeah, LMLI should be back as well. It should be a massive addition for Wexford to have back. No, I think Wexford are definitely favourites, but I wouldn't rule Peamount out in this game.
Yeah, interesting times ahead. That we're way over time. Sorry for the little bit of a rant we went on about the whole structure of the game, but I think it's something that's kind of been bubbling on the show for the last couple of weeks. So something we kind of wanted to get off our chests collectively, but it's been definitely from me anyway. So apologies to anyone I may have offended, but I'm quite happy to have any conversation with anyone who wants to about that whole structure of things. There's so much wrong with what we're doing, and yet we're so close to being really, really top notch at what we do. We just need to raise the bar, and it needs to come from within the clubs. We can't expect UEFA or the FAI to raise the bar for us. You have to want to push that bar up yourself, and then make them follow, if that makes sense. Like Shamrock Rovers have done on the men's side with the academy. There's no reason why we can't see as good standards across the board, across the leagues. But for me, starting that ahead of women's football role and a proper strategy as to what is going on with women's football in this country, because at the moment we just seem like a bit of a headless chicken. Anyway, that is it for this week. We will be back with you next week. I hope we won't upset more people next week. We promise we'll be a little bit easier on people, but we will chat to everybody.
Just before we do go, are we getting any major upsets this weekend in the All Ireland Cup?
Define upset.
Okay, so give me your four winners of the four games.
I think I go with the same four as you went. I think Wexford might be Peamount, and that's about as close as we get. So I think we're looking at Glentoran, Shells, Galway, and potentially Wexford. I think Wexford
home advantage could be massive this weekend.
Yeah, well, I think that's what they've earned. You know, like they're the better sides in the group stages. They're the better sides. They're at home. They should win the games. That being said, I think any of those away teams could win the game on any given day. If the home teams take their eye off the ball or maybe lose a bit of focus on this competition because of other things that are coming up, whether it's Athlone aren't in this competition anymore, but if it's just take their eye off the ball a little bit, even by 2 or 3%, the away sides are more than capable of punishing them. Individual errors may make the choice, in my opinion, in a lot of these games. But
I'm gonna call it. Ella Flaccini's gonna score a screamer this weekend.
She does it every weekend. What are you talking about? Listen, thanks for joining us for the last hour and 20 minutes. We're really sorry for keeping you so long. We'll be back next week. Best luck wherever you're going to a game this week. Enjoy it. We'll talk to you next week.